Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and joining us from Chicago is Annie Logue. Annie, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Lee. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited. It's a real privilege and a treat, folks. So Annie Logue has her background is finance. She's a
Mhm.
CFA. She is financial analyst. She's also a business writer. She's written for Business Insider and other major financial publications. And like I said, she's in Chicago. She also does quite a bit of storytelling. She's done business storytelling, political advocacy storytelling, but really, she likes helping folks make sense of big concepts and jargon and all the stuff that makes it hard to understand these very critical aspects of life. But she's really good about that and explaining the why it matters, getting past all the vocabulary. So that has been a real gift also to her Chicago community as she has held the title of president for both Junior League and the League of Women Voters. So,
I was
as I
not
said,
Junior League president,
thank you.
just League of
Thank
Women
you.
Voters. I don't want to claim more than.
No, no, but that's sorry, my apologies.
That's
I
okay.
heard her speak at a Junior League
Yes,
conference about this. So she was one of the
yes.
main speakers, and that was a very well attended conference. It was very healing for me, just being in a room full of strong, educated, involved women, particularly in November of 2024, I think was the date. So that was a treat. Annie, can you tell us, are you native to Chicago? What's your story with Chicago and how did you go into finance?
Well, I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, which is a city on the Pennsylvania border. It's between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And when I was a kid, it had an enormous steel industry. It was second only to Pittsburgh in terms of steel output. And when I was in seventh grade, the steel mills started closing, and you had just total economic devastation. And it's actually something I've been researching and working on a little bit right now, with because we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of when the mills started closing in 1977. And what I saw was just how these effects rippled through the entire economy, how they affected people, and how hard it has been to overcome. I mean, Youngstown is a fraction of the population it was when I was a kid. It is a high crime, high poverty city now because it's really hard to overcome that kind of economic devastation. And there's also, it creates trauma that has really lasted. One of my friends from high school said that she doesn't think things will turn around until everybody who is alive when the mills closed is gone. She's like, it
Mm,
just needs to get out of their system. And I think she has a point, you know.
yeah,
But that was something I really like.
that's
I
true.
really wanted to understand that better. I wanted to understand all of this effect of, money and economies and how they affected people's lives. And I went to college at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and that's what brought me to the Chicago area. And then I studied econ as an undergrad at Northwestern, and then I studied finance at University of Chicago. My husband is from the Chicago area. He was born in the same town as the Pope. So very exciting. A lot of
Okay.
excited South Siders to have a Pope from Chicago. Um, but so I'm very much a Midwesterner, very much like a Great Lakes person. And I, worked traditional investment banking career. And the firm that I worked for was sold while I was on maternity leave,
Oh,
which was kind of disruptive, shall we say.
yeah.
And I was trying to decide, like, okay, now what do I want to do with myself? I couldn't really go back. I wasn't really in the greatest place to be looking for a job. And I thought that what I had always liked about investment banking I liked writing reports. I liked doing research. I liked giving client presentations. And so since then, I have been doing that in some form or another. I've been self employed for a long time now. And what I found is that there's just a lot of really interesting work out there. You just have to kind of find it.
Mm,
Um, but it's there. And I also found that having control of my own time made it a lot easier to be a community volunteer, and that was a way that I could meet people, learn things, and I hope make a bit of a difference in the world around me.
yeah. Oh, and you certainly have. I really appreciate your um, talk about the mills closing in Youngstown. So I'm in Great Falls, Montana, and big mining. In fact, the
Yeah.
mining out here done a lot of damage to the soil. There's like whole parts of Montana that are beautiful, or you could build and develop really nice properties on, but you can't because the soil from some of the mining and um, that economic trauma is real in
Hmm.
that and you might have some creative ideas, you might have some energy towards a project, and then you got people like, oh no, this is, and then it's a fear of a lot of different of it's a fear of risk, and
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
understand like when you've known
Yeah.
devastation, there's but at the same time it does make it harder for newness, or just whatever that looks like, whatever the change may be, but um and then Northwestern University in Evanston is just I walked around that campus last March or so, beautiful,
Yeah.
um, and it felt very quiet, and I imagine that it was just like a peaceful place to study. Um, Not to say that it's not city and urban and all that, but
No,
just the layout might
it's
have been a really
be
nice place.
yeah. Being right on Lake Michigan like that is just beautiful. One of the things I found there, it skews affluent.
Yeah,
It's
right.
Evanston is an affluent suburb, and the student body tends to skew affluent. And maybe I shouldn't have been surprised because you're talking about people who are 18, 19, 20. But I was really surprised by how little people understood about a lot of the world.
Hmm,
That
really?
people who you get in situations where you have people who've traveled a lot to Europe, but not to other places in the US,
Right. Uh-huh.
or who have never worked with certain kind of people or met certain kinds of people. I mean, my high school was fairly well racially integrated. I went to a Catholic high school, and one thing you find in a lot of urban areas is that and this is a gross generalization, but the generalization is that the city schools are all, the student body is almost all black, the suburban schools, the student body is almost all white. And so in a lot of places, the Catholic schools are the most racially integrated, which is awesome, right? But I was like, people who've never been around people who aren't like them. It's just like, and again, that was a while ago. And again, we're talking about people who are young. But Northwestern was a very interesting place, I think. I mean, like I said, the campus is beautiful. You're right on the lake. Um, and that does make it kind of conducive for thinking and learning. But I found myself like sometimes I felt like I'd be in classes where I would be like the voice of the working class, not because I was from a working class background so much, but that because I knew people who were.
Yeah.
Like when people would say generalizations, I was like, wait, this is like my friend's father you're talking, these are people like my friend's fathers that you're talking about,
Mhm.
and it was just very interesting. It was an interesting place to go to school. I made great friends. I got a great education. So, but yeah,
Well,
it's beautiful.
and that's a good point, is, like you said, the wealth, the privilege, they're, quote, "well-traveled."
Hmm.
And this is not just a Northwestern. This is like I've noticed this also in my spaces. Like you have people that have done some of the very awesome Pinterest things,
Hmm.
and but it was also either like westernized or like touristy that it was an adventure. It wasn't, and so it's been very interesting over the years to talk about how how you travel, how so it's not just the and which and these of course are all questions of privilege and access and like who and so
They
I want to be
are.
careful there, but
No, they are.
um is that when you we'll do a deeper dive into junior league and league of women voters in a second, but talk about your involvement at Northwestern. Were you involved with women's activism, or how did you get, like you said, you value
Hmm.
your volunteering because of
Hmm.
your job. Has it always been a part of you?
Um, in college, I don't think I was as active as maybe I could have been. I think I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do, and a lot of students were very much looking at things from the perspective of what would be good on their resumes as opposed to what would really make a difference. And I worked for one of my professors, which was really great. Robert Gordon, who is a major figure in economics. And it's really interesting because a lot of his work has been on whether or not the United States is going to continue to grow. So in some ways, that was the biggest experience I had. It wasn't so much volunteering, but it was sitting in his office. And a lot of what I did was making copies and file, reports. But it was also really interesting, just like to hear him talk and to be part of the kind of work he's done. Northwestern has a big dance marathon every year, and I raised money and danced one year for, I don't even remember. It was over 40, it was on about 40 hours, I think. Kind of thing you can do when you're young.
Right.
So I did that. We raised money for, I think it was Easter seals that year. It is still one of the largest student run charities in the country. That's been going on for however many years. So I was involved in that. I was a member of a sorority, that was mostly social.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was active in my dorm government, so did actually do that.
Yeah.
This is a
Well,
while ago. I'm like trying to remember all these
yeah,
things I
no, it's
did.
all good. Well, I was just like trying to paint this picture because,
And just like I
I
mostly feel like I was either in class at the library or at Professor Gordon's office.
well, and your comment how you felt that you were standing up for, the working class in an affluent environment in a financial, economics. You're not in the social work, or maybe any other school wing department where you might have a lot of allies or people that share a perspective. And I've noticed that even in my own research. I've been reading a number of just different books in general, but the last few books I've read were books written by like UCal Berkeley, Berkeley, or a few other books of like urban people, urban scholars, academics going and doing 2-year research stints in another environment so they can better understand. And those books are very powerful. I'm very glad but I've been thinking like I want to see the flip. I want to see like the small town folks talking about, well, actually, and like sharing their lens because I was like, this is cool, but I also feel like, you know, a lot is missing.
Like I always thought it might be interesting. It's fairly traditional for people to do a year abroad or semester abroad in college, but maybe do like a semester in a whole nother part of the country. you
Right.
know? Like,
Right.
wouldn't that be interesting? Like, for example,
That would be.
Montana, there are 5 states. I've been to 45 US states. Montana is one I still haven't been to.
Yeah. Right.
I've heard it's beautiful. I've never
Yeah.
been.
No,
And it's
it's awesome.
big.
We love it.
Mm-mm.
But but absolutely. I mean, that's kind of like you probably could fill that with like Teach for America or something like that. Just go be a teacher somewhere. But you're absolutely right. United States is not monolithic, wildly different temperaments. And
Right,
even I think it would be important to learn, not just like culturally, but politically to see that what it means to be a blue or red or Republican or Democrat changes where you are. Like there's a difference, there can be a difference between, a rural Democrat and maybe a Seattle Democrat, or
right,
wherever.
right. And I really
Yeah.
don't like that red and blue formulation because I think it makes the divides that we already have worse.
Right,
You know,
right,
to just sort of dismiss an entire state as it's red or it's blue. And it's like,
right.
well, there's a lot of things going on, you know. So maybe, yeah,
Well,
you're right.
like
Like,
here in I'm saying this out of experience. I moved up here from Texas. Texas is red, right? But Montana's red. But yet they have codified. They have both abortion under women's medical right to privacy, and they have physician-assisted suicide. And I was like, those are very progressive. Like they're also going after dark money. Like they're doing a transparent ballot. I don't know if you've heard that, but going
that
after dark money,
sounds, ooh,
yeah, in politics on a state level. So like it's
yeah,
but it's and again it's a different type of red, and a lot of it you talked about Catholicism influencing. A lot of it's because of it's like a Catholic libertarian. It's not an evangelical Christianity. They're different, and you could even say so um it's just why, and so really appreciate your nuance there. Thank you for bringing that into the conversation. So then after graduation, I know that you talked about going into financial analyst and
hmm.
finding what you called weird work. Um, and you started to make time for volunteering. How did you find Junior League and League of Women Voters, and what are they for those who may not know?
Well, the Junior League is a progressive year organization founded in 1901. And it is a women's organization that focuses on training women to be leaders in their communities. And that what that has meant has changed a lot over the years. When it was founded, it was strictly for debutantes. Now it's much broader. And that is great because that increases the kind of influence that people can have in the community. Um, when the group founded in Chicago, they worked closely. One of their advisors was Jane Addams, who was responsible for the settlement house movement, but also very much making volunteerism more professional. She founded the field of social work because the idea was that before people can just jump in and help others, they actually have to do research and see what people need and what they're often, their needs are not necessarily what you think they are. And also, they may, when you look at a given community group, they may be doing things that you don't know about. And so you want to build on the strengths in the community, not undermine things that they're already doing. And that approach has really informed the work that the Junior League does, that it's in, almost 300 different communities around the world. But in every community, it's trying to find out what this particular community needs and how women can meet those needs, and then how women can develop the skills they need to meet those needs.
Absolutely. Well,
Oh, and
I
then
like
the
how
League of
you.
Women Voters.
Yeah.
You asked me about that. That was
Yeah.
founded in 1920 as a condition of women's suffrage. There was a concern that women, one of the arguments against giving women the vote was that they would just vote the way their husbands or fathers told them to. And so it was the suffragists decided that there should be an organization that would help women learn how to vote, basically, learn how to research issues, learn how to research candidates. And that is essentially what the League does. It is all about voter service. It is helping people register to vote, help them understanding how to vote, why voting is important, helping them learn about candidates, learn about issues in their community.
And I didn't know that that was how it emerged.
Hmm.
Was as a outcome of the suffragist movement. And
Yeah.
it makes sense. And League of Women Voters is, I mean, it's everywhere. I know that it's here in Montana, and it's we have a few chapters of Junior League too. How did you get involved with Junior League?
Junior League, it was all sort of when my job kind of blew up. Um, and I hadn't had a lot of time to volunteer before then because I had just been working so many hours. And I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And somebody that I knew from work, but who had had a different job, and she was active in the junior league, and she was like, you need to join this. Then you will figure out, like, you will find your people, you will figure out what to do. And she was right. Yeah. And you really learn how to how to manage people, how to run a project, things that that you would think you would learn in an office setting, but you really don't. There's not usually that kind of formal emphasis on those things.
Right,
You
right.
know, it's just kind of assumed. You get promoted to a certain level, you have to manage staff. If you don't know how to do it, oh well, people will quit. If enough people quit, you get fired. It's that kind of like there's a lot of in the American workplace, there's a lot of just throwing people into the fire,
Mm-hmm.
especially at smaller organizations.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, in an organization like the Junior League, it's like you can learn, like, well, if you're a committee chair, this is how you structure things. If you have people on your committee who aren't participating, here are some things you can try.
Yeah.
It's really great.
It really is. And like you said, those skills are transferable. Then you do get to
Hmm.
go to the office and you get to be a little bit more, you have your ish together at the
Yeah,
meeting because you have a template, you have a formula. Um, and I've noticed just I appreciate folks who are involved with, something like League of Women Voters, Junior League, Elks Lodge, even, Rotary, because they're used to formal meetings, project collaboration that is a lot more in depth. Like you said, there's a lot of responsibility that somehow the invisible hand of corporations just move along, but you don't get that. If you want something done in your community, it comes from
that's
us.
right. I mean, those
It is.
traditional organizations seem very old fashioned, but that doesn't mean they're not relevant. Because you're still like every community has projects that need to be done. There are tons of people who want to learn how to do things. And so you're in this really great situation where you can learn from the people you work with, and it's not punitive. Like, again, like in the workplace, you can threaten to fire people, you can actually fire people. If you're volunteering, you have to be able to get work out of people, and you can't threaten to fire, right?
No, and
And
yeah,
you learn more that way.
you do. You have to
Yeah.
find the fun, the engagement, the heart, the
Hmm.
the social community aspect. And that is what's special is you're really finding what drives people because at the workplace it's money. Like you clock in, like you're going to show up that day whether you're
Hmm.
motivated to do the work or not because, for a number of reasons. But uh with something like volunteering, as someone in a leadership position, you have to keep the volunteers. You have to not burn them out. Keep the mission and purpose alive. Managing personalities. Can you talk about a project that you did with Junior League?
The biggest one that I was a part of, this was several years ago, but I was the admissions chair the year that we did away with the um, sponsorship requirements. You know, again, when the Junior League was founded, it was an organization of debutantes, and there was a lot of emphasis on people being from the right background. And in many communities for many years, getting into the Junior League was difficult. In Chicago, for many years, you didn't apply to be in the Junior League. If someone you knew would recommend you, you would be voted on and approved or disapproved. And only if you had been approved as a member would someone tell you that you were now invited to join.
Yeah,
And that
that's
doesn't work. It worked maybe at
right.
one point in time, but it doesn't work with, you know, modern women who don't necessarily want to be part of that. Also, I mean, people are so mobile. It's really difficult to say to somebody that, well, you're in this community, you don't know anybody, therefore you're not worthy of being part of us, because people move all the time. You know, they get
Yeah.
transferred. You know, you were in the military. You don't have a lot of say where you go. You know.
Oh, and to your point, being a member of Junior League, if you move to a city where there's a chapter, you can plug into that. It
Yes, you can plug into
with your
it,
point
and
of being mobile.
a lot of the new members we have in Chicago are people who are new to the city. They don't know anybody. They want to get involved. They want to learn about the city. They want to become part of it. They want to make friends. These are great things. So when we redid the sponsorship requirement over the years in Chicago, it had become lesser. Like, first, there was the process where someone proposed you and you were voted on, and then you were told that you were eligible to join. Then we allowed people to join if they had three sponsors. Then it went down to one sponsor. And finally, we were like, this makes no sense, right? It created, even if we tried to make it easy for people to find sponsors, you're still creating a barrier that isn't necessary. The barrier is particularly affecting, you know, groups of people who felt that they had never been welcome, particularly, you know, Black women, Jewish women. It also was making it difficult for people who are new to Chicago. It was alienating some people who had been in Chicago, you know, a lot of professional women who are kind of like, I'm a partner in my law firm and I have to go through this. Like, you know,
Yeah.
okay, fine, I'll go somewhere else and volunteer, you know. So there was some of that. It was like, this just isn't serving anybody, you know. And we had community organizations that were kind of like, we don't want to work with you because of this whole sponsorship thing. And so we're like,
Yeah.
why do it? But it was controversial because there were a lot of members who came in under the old regime and thought it was important, or that it was something that they personally valued, or that they liked staying involved with the league so that they could continue to introduce new people. Like, they viewed that as a big part of the value that they added to the league. You know, if you're somebody, if you like went out and tried to recruit all of your friends and your friends to join the league, and suddenly it's like, well, we don't need that anymore. You know, there were people who felt like, so
Yeah.
it was a bit of a cultural change. But the president at the time, and I pushed it through. You know, worked really hard. We did a lot of benchmarking with other leagues around the country. We talked to, I don't even know how many people in the league to try to get their sense of support. And then everything's been fine,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
That
I think we're in a great place right now. So that's very exciting.
that, and I understand that, like you said, the old regime pushing back
Hmm.
against the changes, feeling like a loss of status,
Hmm.
loss of exclusivity, loss of, like I said, status, but there's like an edge to it that's identity too. And
Yeah.
that's a lot to navigate, and I'm interested in because I'm with you in that, like, you've got a successful law firm partner coming in, and she's like, I've got to, like, what is this, like a college sorority? I got to go through,
Yeah.
what is, like, I'm just trying to, you know,
Right.
and it's also was a big change, not just that junior league and your chapter went through, but just volunteer institutions changed a lot in the last 20 some odd 30 years, not just with the women's rights movement and what we developments there, but a lot of women simply don't have all the time that they used to have.
No.
And
No.
and
No.
and we've noticed that here is like just a massive dip out of time, not out of desire. And um, have you seen on either in the junior league or the League of Women Voters, how have y'all been navigating the economy of time?
It's um it's tough, because again, a lot of these organizations were built on the labor of stay-at-home moms. And there are fewer stay-at-home parents than there used to be. And also in many communities, people who are choosing to be stay-at-home parents want to focus on their children, their house, their children's school. They're choosing to be stay-at-home parents because they don't want to have outside obligations, and so it's different, right? It's a different population. But at the same time, I think what we're seeing really since the pandemic is that people are realizing they need to have connection. And I think there's been a revival in a lot of these organizations, at least in Chicago. There's been a big revival in a lot of churches, in a lot of neighborhood organizations, community organizations, because that's just it. People are realizing we need each other. The pandemic was easier if you had people you could connect to, if you could have, like, in our neighborhood, people were trading puzzles and books and things. But
Yeah.
if you, we have a block club. There are people who organize our block party and who maintain the email list. And that work that they did helped make it easier for everyone because there was already a connection that we could build on. And I think that that's something we're really starting, that people are appreciating more and more, right? We're not, politicians are not going to save us. Oligarchs, billionaires are not going to save us. We've got to do it ourselves. And I think that that's really driving a lot of engagement in recent years.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And you pointed out earlier that the Pope is from Chicago. You've got a
He
lot of noise
is.
coming out of Chicago this past year politically. Can you talk about how League of Women Voters plays a role in advancing, political activism for women?
Yes. Political activism for women, political activism for everyone. And I think that that's something that, the name, it's a great name. People know the brand, but it's for everyone, not just for women. Um, that's kind of like, how do you change a brand that has that kind of incredible recognition? Um, what we're really seeing is a few different things. The first is the realization, a lot of people are like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. My vote, it's all sewn up. It's all, whatever, the billionaires, whatever. But if your vote didn't matter, people wouldn't try to suppress it. And the mere fact that people are trying to suppress the vote is increasing the perceived value, which I think is really, really important. It's just like, wait a minute, right? If people want to make it harder to vote by mail, why would they do that? Well, one reason they do it is because they know that that's how people vote. And if you look at the data, like consistently, rich people vote. Billionaires have some of the highest voting participation rate. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't do it. And
Right.
I think the other thing that's been very interesting was the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York City, because that is clearly an election where the wealthiest, New York has some of the wealthiest people in the
Yeah.
world live there. They were really opposed to it. They raised incredible amounts of money, incredible amounts of campaigning. They, supported a candidate that they thought would be in opposition, but it shows that they could not stop what the average New Yorker wanted, right? The average New Yorker is the person who went to the polls and voted. And no matter how you feel about the outcome of that election, it's pretty clear that what mattered was people going to the polls and voting. It
Hmm.
wasn't the amount of money that was raised. It wasn't about the amount of noise that people raised in the media or spent on advertising. It was just getting people to line up, to go down to their whatever public school or coffee shop or church hall and place that vote.
We saw that obstacle to voting down in Texas with Jasmine
Mm-hmm.
Crockett
Mm-hmm.
and James Tallarico last month in the 11th hour. How the state of Texas interfered with folks able to vote in Dallas area. I think it was Dallas.
Yeah. And
But
again,
yeah,
it's
there's
like obviously that vote's valuable, or they wouldn't have taken the time and effort to try to
right.
stop it. That's all there
And
is.
or the um, the amount of money being poured into online creators, podcasters,
Mm-hmm.
influencers, because again, if those audiences didn't matter, if those votes didn't matter, they wouldn't spend the money. Like,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
um, and that's what like has just been such an eye opener of how much you can um I don't know, just change the message, dominate the message, and how democracy is actually quite fragile. It's you
It's
have to be very
very fragile.
vigilant.
Yeah.
And
And that's, I'll say, like, I think a lot of organizations thought that when Barack Obama was elected in 2008, particularly here in Chicago, because we love Barack Obama, but
yeah, you're going on a streak.
yeah,
You got Obama and the Pope.
right.
Like,
We love
okay.
Pope Leo. We love Barack Obama. But, in 2008, there was the sense like, well, it's all solved. Democracy
Right.
is solved.
We did
The will
it.
of the people has prevailed, and we've got somebody who's, got, super like, it's done. Yay, we're done. And then you realize that it's not, that
No.
it's like, this is every single election. There will be people who will try to influence the vote. There will be people who will try to stop the vote. And every single election, you've got a new slate of candidates, you've got a new bunch of issues. So even somebody who maybe you liked when they were on the school board 15 years ago, you might not want to be the mayor this year, you know? And so it's like every time you've got to go through and think like, well, who are these people? What are the issues? Who should I vote for? And it takes a little bit of time. It doesn't take as much time as you might think. The League of Women Voters has a really great tool called vote411.org. It's a website that has information all over the country. And so you can go in and research the candidates. A lot of public television stations do different kind of candidate forums, or they'll put They'll allow candidates to record video messages, and you can go into the station's website and see them. We have lost a lot of local newspapers, but there are still local newspapers. And so some of them do endorsements, some of them don't do endorsements, but they do interviews, they do profiles. And so you can sometimes just the fact that a candidate refuses to participate in a newspaper's profile gives you some information about them, or gives you, as
Yeah.
helps you understand a little better maybe where they're coming from or not. um, but yeah, and I think, we know there's a ton of noise. We know that everybody's running negative ads against everybody else.
That noise,
Um,
yeah. Mhm.
so don't pay attention to the ads and
Yeah.
go one step beyond. It's a little bit of work, but it's not that much work. It's maybe a half an hour of your time. And these are people who have a lot of control. Like your local city council people are determining things like where there's going to be street lights. Are there going to be, on bad intersections, are they going to put a turn arrow or not?
Right.
These are things that start to have direct effects on your health and safety.
Mhm.
And so you should care. Is it somebody who pays attention to this, or are they running for city council on some kind of national policy? It's like, wait, we want to know, like, what are you going to do about, like, this blighted district? What are you going to do about traffic control? What are you going to do about attracting new businesses? What are you going to do about the park system? These are things that affect your daily life. And so,
And well, and to your point, we have one of our local parks. There are no um, like ramps to
oh,
get onto the sidewalk. There's a sidewalk around the park,
okay.
but to get onto the sidewalk, it's just all curb all the way around.
That is a problem
Eh,
for people with
It's a
strollers,
problem.
people with wagons, people in
Oh yeah.
wheelchairs.
And it's been a thing. It's been going on for
Mm-hmm.
about 2 years where people are
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, and here's the other side of it. We really only have about 3 to 4 really good summer months that you can count on, and
Yeah.
so things like that are a big fuss for 4 months and then we forget about it. So that's
Okay.
why it also, when I say this has been going on for years, you're like, then why didn't you do it? And I was like, because we're like, oh yeah, the curbs,
The
we got to get the
curbs.
ramps. And then the winter hits and we're like, oh yeah, we haven't been outside. Um, but who's, I'm not pushing a stroller in the snow, but
Right, right,
you know what I
right.
mean? So, but it is, we were, because it's obviously an issue for ADA, for mother. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a whole host. I mean, it could get us in trouble federally if
yeah,
the
yeah,
right
yeah, yeah.
administration wanted to come after us. And
Right.
uh, but again, it's kind of like you go through the hoops of bureaucracy, um, and all of that. Like those are our people. Like,
Right.
they live here too. Like that is also their park.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that's their neighbor, and so just continuing to show up, and like you said earlier, it does also show time because you're in community, those very stark divisions because of national conversations that
Mm-hmm.
have polarized us. Those, it's, you can't really do that in a lot of these community involvement
No.
meetings because you have to get other things done.
Right.
And that has been really growing and maturing for me to maintain volunteer leadership positions, navigate the last 10 years of the society. Definitely have had some points of tension with other women or other folks, but then also having to be like, okay, but if I want to get that fundraiser done, or if I
Mm-hmm.
want to, like, we have to find a way through somehow. So really, again, um, different skills that you are forced and pushed into because it's not the work environment. The work
No.
environment, you're not supposed to talk about politics. I
No.
mean, ideally. So, like, those conversations aren't even coming up. But now
Mm-mm.
you are in close
Mm-mm.
proximity with other women and their lives and their views and how policy. So, I feel like I went on a whole little
Right.
tangent there
But
talking about that.
no, but that is like, can you find common ground? Can you find a way to work together on certain issues? Um, I know, and I know I told the story when I gave that presentation in Chicago that you heard, but when I was president of the League of Women Voters, and one of the things that I'm enormously proud of is we got a major road in Chicago named for Ida B. Wells, who was a suffragist, who was a civil rights activist. She was born into slavery. She went to college. She became a school teacher, and this was in the South. But she started writing for Northern newspapers about lynchings. And one of the big things that she did to back up her stories was she used government records to verify and to back up her reporting. She was one of the first journalists to rely heavily on government records as a form of reporting. So she's very well known in the journalist world. And she was also, telling people what was happening in the South, how people were being killed often for no reason. And she eventually moved to Chicago. It wasn't safe for her to stay in the South. And in Chicago, she got involved in a lot of issues, but one of the things was the suffrage. A lot of Black people were opposed to women's suffrage for several reasons. Some of the early suffragists were out and out racist. They were white women who were outraged that Black men could vote and they couldn't. A lot of Black people felt that we should get the right for men to vote protected before we started expanding the vote for women. That Black men were given the right to vote by the Constitution in the Civil War, but that was widely ignored all over the country. And what Ida B. Wells said was that if Black women voted, that would increase the power of the overall Black vote, and it would make it easier for Black candidates to be elected. And she was one of the founders of the League. And she was right about that, actually, because shortly thereafter, then she worked on the campaign to get the first Black alderman elected in Chicago, Oscar DePriest. But so for our centennial, we're like, we should name a road for Ida B. Wells. She's, incredible to the history of civil rights, incredible to the history of suffrage, incredible to the history of Chicago. So we're like, this is a no brainer. Yay, this is done. And we found out, first of all, there's a lot of opposition from strange quarters. One is that there already was a Wells Street, and there were people who are like, everybody will get confused. Um, we had members who like went to all the businesses that were actually on the street that would be affected to ask them their view. And they were all very excited. One was a blues club that was like, yes, we would love this. Um, we had to go to City Hall. We had to deal with we were helping to provide political support for the two aldermen whose ward the street was in. So we had to organize lists of community groups that would want to, have their names on the petition. And then when we finally got it approved, it turned out that the street they decided on was actually a state highway, not a city highway. So we had to go to Springfield. um,
Oh,
And so this is something that
yeah.
you think is going to be super easy. Like, hey, we should have a street named for Ida B. Wells. But it's finally happened and it's really cool. And you're coming in on 90 on Interstate 290 and you see the signs for Ida B. Wells. You see Ida B. Wells on the buses. The morning traffic reporters are talking about traffic on the Ida B. It's really
It is. And um it's a special thing, and it's a cool visible effort that you made And that's something to be proud of. But like you said, a lot of red tape.
Mhm. A
Um,
lot of red tape, a
and
lot of volunteers who worked on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people, a lot of hands. Well, tell me, as we're getting closer to the end now, there's been a lot of talk out of this administration. Some the Save Act, lots of different interviews and clips of folks saying some pretty concerning things about women that they, revoke the 19th. How is your chapter, your community, and your network of women responding to these headlines?
I mean, some of it's just every day. It's like, what are we going to hear? And are they serious or are they just trying to deflect from other things in the news? How much of this is serious and how much of this is so that we won't concentrate on other things that are happening? I think that repealing the 19th Amendment would be extraordinarily difficult, but that again, just because you have the constitutional right doesn't mean you have the actual right. And that was what we saw with voting rights for men, for Black men, right? I mean, it wasn't until the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 that Black people could rely on being allowed to vote. So I think it gets into this whole issue of you have to be eternally vigilant. And I think the point that I would say to people is if your vote didn't matter, people wouldn't try to make it more difficult to vote. And the mere fact that they're making it difficult shows that um, your vote matters and you should use it. And you should not allow someone to take something of value from you. You wouldn't allow somebody to come to your house and just like take your car or take your house keys and evict you. You would be very upset if somebody stole your wallet. Don't let somebody take your vote. It clearly has value, it clearly has meaning, and it can clearly make a difference. And that's what I tell people. I mean, you get into some of the finer things like the type, voter impersonation fraud is extraordinarily rare.
Right.
It's really difficult to pull off. Like, why would you go down to your neighborhood precinct and pretend to be somebody else? Right? What are you going to do when your neighbor comes in and goes, Lee, how are you? I haven't seen you in ages. And you're like, no, 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 no. I'm voting as Jane Smith today.
Right, right. Yeah, or you try to fake it, and it's like, yeah, I live in a town of 80,000 people. They'd be like, Lee, I know, like the person checking my ID would be like, I know you. What do you do?
Right, right. And I mean,
You're part of the
even
coalition.
I live in a city, a metropolitan area of 3 million, but even still, like down at our voting precinct, it's just people from my neighborhood.
Right.
So they know me. So I can't pretend to be somebody I'm not. Somebody will know.
It's no, and one of the things you talk about is how precious it is, and I think about that out here in Montana, and part of the women's rights history out here um, is that a lot of women followed their men out here. They went west as part of the Go West propaganda, and those men, because it was dangerous out here, either died or were dangerous to their women with alcoholism and the long winters. And so, between the men's death and his danger, it really forced, and there was very little people, so no tax base. So, if you were to be like,
Right,
no, women can't have property, you'd be like, okay, well, what are we going to do with all these women then?
right.
Whose men have died, or, they had to take their children and run in the middle of the night. They didn't have the tax base for welfare, and so that forced them to say, okay, so women should have the right to property pretty early
Yeah,
on. But
yeah.
then you gotta afford the property, right? Now you gotta go to
Right,
work. And then it's like, but
right,
then you need education for the labor. So
right.
very quickly, now you're talking about education, labor, property, education for her, education for now she's a mom,
Yeah,
roads, you got safety. And then on top of all of that, whether it's your property tax, your income tax, or where you're being taxed, that is taxation. Like without representation, we have missed the point of American democracy. I mean, like taxation and representation go hand in hand, and so it's like you already pay for that right through your taxes. You already pay to
Right,
have your like you're paying to have an opinion
right,
both via your
right.
taxes.
You
And
pay for
that's
that right, both like your taxes, if you or your family members serve in the military, in the kind of work that you and people are doing in your community every day. This is a costly right, but it is an important right. Anything that's important is costly.
yeah,
So
definitely.
value it. Yeah.
That was so powerful. I mean that hour went by like real quick.
Yeah, it was so
Thank you
fun.
so
It's
much
always
for your
fun to
time.
talk with you.
Back at you. Well, for those who want to learn more, how can they follow or get a hold, or just where can they go to learn more about you, Annie?
I have a website, and www.annielogue.com. I have a Substack called The Whatever Years. So those are probably, and I'm on LinkedIn. So those are probably the best ways to find me if you need to find me. Um, my books are, I'm the author of several books on investing in Wiley's For Dummies series, and they're available at larger bookstores throughout this country, and some of them have been translated. So if you are in Brazil or Germany or Holland, you can find them there.
Wow, that's a claim to fame.
It
Very
is. It's
cool.
exciting. Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right, well, Annie, thank you so much for being
You're
here.
welcome.
Before I wrap up the call, do you have anything else to say to the audience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been really wonderful. It's been wonderful to find out what you're working on because this is really cool. Um, and my big reminder to people is get involved in your community, find out who your neighbors are, work on things that are important to you and your neighbors, and vote. And tell your friends when your friends say voting doesn't matter, remind them that if your vote didn't matter, people wouldn't try to take it away. There's a lot of work you can do just talking to your friends.
Thank you, Annie, for being here. And folks, I hope that y'all learned something today and that y'all got motivated to either get involved with Junior League or League of Women
Mm-hmm.
Voters or just see that democracy is important and that caring about your vote and what's going on around your neighborhood, your state. I know the national news is very overwhelming right now, but you do have power in your backyard. And don't
Mm.
forget that power. Don't
Yes.
forget that power that you have to say in the voting box about national issues either. But do not sleep on all the things that really do shape how you and your romantic partner and your family members, how you navigate your habitat, because it's all local decisions, man. And in fact, just a good example of this is that our local school district just switched uh, tomato providers or marinara providers for
Hmm.
our pizza and our cheese
Mm-hmm.
sticks and whatever else you put marinara with, so that they could go with more local
Oh,
Montana produce tomatoes. And it was
that's
just
cool.
simple and it saved them
Yeah.
money. It's easier on, environmental exhaust and gas and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And now we can do field trips to show kids, hey, this is where your food comes from. And
That
like
is super cool.
just little ways like that. It doesn't um you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just look at what's around you and build with those allies into a coalition. So you're embodying that, Annie. I absolutely
Thank you.
adore you. I have so much respect for you. Keep doing what you're doing. And for my audience, don't forget to comment and let me know what you thought of this conversation. Please go follow up with Annie's writing. As said, she's published in all sorts of major publications, so you're bound to learn something and somewhere in all the different writing. You're gonna so But yeah, folks, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and this has been another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and until next time, see ya.
Thank you. Bye.